Okay, it's officially noon. Would you like me to start, Marty? Hello and welcome. My name is Jenny Wilson. I will be your moderator for the Port Angeles School District Luncheon Chat with Superintendent Brewer. This virtual luncheon is being presented remotely via Zoom for all attendees and is recorded. If you wish to share comments or ask questions, please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of the Zoom conference window. Submit your name and please wait to be called on. When it's your turn to speak, your name will be called and your mic will be enabled. If you do not have a mic, please submit your question or comments in the chat and I will read them for you. And now to Superintendent Brewer.
Hello, and welcome back to those of you that were here last week. I see a number of new individuals in the room. I appreciate you spending your lunch with me, very much so. Before I get started today on my topic, I do want to share my, oops, Jenny, can you give me the ability to share my screen? Okay, thank you. I do want to share our upcoming schedule. And this has been promoted on our webpage as well as Facebook. This week, I'm going to continue to address questions in the community and an update on returning to school for next year based on Department of Health guidelines. Next week, I'm going to have a special guest. Assistant Superintendent Olson will be here to talk about our reopening planning for the fall, transitional kindergarten, and also summer school plans. On June 4th, I have Nathan Rodal, which will come out. He's the orchestra director and the arts department chair, and Pam Helpenstahl, which works in the business education department at Port Angeles High School. She's also ASB and yearbook advisor. They're going to come out to talk about a summary of the activities that we've engaged in this year and what next year will potentially look like. And then finally, on 6/11, I'll have athletic director Dwayne Johnson and head football coach Brent Washi come out and speak around athletic programs this year and what to expect next year and in the future. So with that being said, the format today, for those of you that are new to this chat, my goal is to spend approximately 15 to 20 minutes sharing, kind of the purpose of or the topic to be discussed today, and then leave ample time, 40 to 45 minutes, to just engage in two-way conversation, and ask that any question that you have is open for discussion. And if I don't have the answer for you today, as we've found throughout the pandemic, there are times with evolving circumstances and situations where there's just not an answer. I will be certain to get that back to you in either email format, a phone call, and or at the next chat, I'll have an answer. So with that being said, today, I do want to, again, speak to our guidance that came out of the Department of Health last week. This came out, I believe, a week ago Thursday. And so it was hot off the presses last week. Really hadn't had a chance to read it through its entirety when I presented it to the community. But this week, a deeper understanding of where we're headed and the work moving forward. So Jenny Wilson has each of your email addresses, and she will be certain to email this to you so you can review it in more thorough fashion after we speak about it today. The first thing I want to start with, and I'm going to speak right off of the document. This comes out of the Department of Health. It was May 13th, 2021. It's the most recent guidance that we do have. I draw your attention to the notice here at the top, and the italics here, which reference, it is likely this document will be updated over the summer prior to the start of the school year. Just as we've seen from the beginning of this pandemic, the guidance have changed many times. And I think they're just prefacing our work this spring and into the summer that, there could be more expected changes to come. But as the superintendent and educational leader of this system, I anticipate the changes to go in the right direction for return to school. And I want to say this at the beginning of the session today, and I'm going to say at the end of the session today, we are gearing up and expecting to be back to school 5 days a week, full-time, regular practice next year. So that's really exciting. That's not only my expectation, that's the expectation of the state of Washington, the governor's office, and everybody in between. So we are gearing up for a full return, and that's my expectation. So the next thing I want to draw your attention to on the first page here is down here in the bold section. And it does call out the 2021-22 school year. Schools must plan to provide full-time in-person education for all interested students with the following mandatory mitigation measures. And speaking about the mandatory mitigation measures, if you're a parent of a child in our system this year, I'm hoping that you have the same experience that I've had. Our mitigation measures this year have worked. We have had cases in our schools, many cases in our schools. As COVID is in the community, it will make its way into our schools. But all of the measures that we've taken this year have been proven to work, and we have no documented case of community transmission within the school, meaning a student or an adult bring COVID into the building, and their experiences in the building lead to them sharing that virus with another person. We have had no documented cases of that within our school system this year. And that's not just our school system, that is also the Department of Health's position as well, and Dr. Berry. So we are very confident that, regardless of what the virus does or does not do this summer, we have the experience and the measures in place that can make schooling happen in a safe manner for all involved. So moving forward, the mandatory mitigation measures for next year start with face coverings. And I know there's a lot of conflicting information out in across the United States. I know CDC has come out with some guidance. Department of Health has come out with their guidance. And then we also have our local health official, Dr. Berry. Right now, today, as of May 21st, face coverings will be a mandatory requirement moving into the summer and the fall for schools. And Governor Inslee did call that out in his press conference last week, that schools and hospitals and clinics were exempt from the lessening requirements around mask. So the way we set today is face coverings will be a mandatory part of what we do this summer and working into the fall. Again, I'm going to default back to the very top of this page. It's likely this document will be updated over the summer. I don't know where that goes. I do know that there is conversation between the Washington State Department of Health to consider, CDC's position on masking. And, I have had conversations with state officials on this very topic. And, by some of their opinions, they believe that maybe this was an oversight by CDC, and CDC might come up with some additional guidance in the near future. And or the Department of Health will look at, CDC guidance and either adopt, additional guidance and or, stay our path and course. So, but as of now, face coverings will be required. The one thing I wanted to, if you're a new parent to our system, the face coverings within our schools have not been a problem. Our staff and our students have done a phenomenal job this year of wearing their face coverings. And, that's just one of the key strategies that we've used to keep that community transmission from occurring within our schools. So right now, today, we're planning on full face coverings for the 2021-22 school year. The next item, which is a mandatory mitigation measure, is ventilation. And we have stayed, this is a mandatory strategy that school districts are required to take this year. And we have and continued work to meet compliance in this area. All of our schools are built much differently than homes and also many businesses. Schools are built even decades ago. Schools built in the 60s and the 70s are built in mind of, fresh air reserves to be flushed through the classrooms. And so we have in all of our teaching and learning spaces across the district, most of them are controlled by dampers. And we have opened our dampers to 100%, so that, we're pulling in 100% fresh air. It does cost us more on the utility side because we're warming and or cooling air as it enters into our facility, and we're bringing in so much air. But that is one of the strategies that is expected and we have used this year. Generally speaking, a classroom in our system will be completely refreshed with 100% new air anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes or every 10 to 15 minutes. And that's on the conservative side. In a lot of cases, it's much faster than that. So we're bringing in lots of fresh air, and we're really we're changing our filters on a more frequent basis. We're using the MERV 13s where, those filters do fit our systems. So we are in complete compliance with the ventilation and have, doubled down and made that a big part of what we've done this year to successfully carry out school without, any community transmission. The next item that's a mandatory mitigation measure is cleaning and disinfecting. And our custodians have done a phenomenal job, and our staff has done a phenomenal job this year of cleaning and disinfecting. Not only do we clean, which is historically what we do as school systems, this year we disinfect, and we disinfect, between sessions. For instance, AM and PM classes, we will disinfect, and we have applicators to do that work for us. And in the evenings and on Wednesdays at the secondary level. So we are working, very diligently and stayed very consistent with regards to our cleaning and disinfecting practices. So really, that's no change for the Port Angeles School District moving into next year, and will continue to be a mandatory mitigation measure. Next item is responding to cases of COVID-19. So each of our schools have a location where students that are showing COVID, or adults that are showing COVID-like symptoms can go, that are larger than our typical nurses' rooms. And so our nurses have done a phenomenal job. We have 4 nurses for 8 buildings this year, and those nurses have worked double time to carry out the work within the buildings. But responding to the case is when we get an alert from the Department of Health and or a parent that there's a potential exposure. We do what's called contact tracing, or the nurses do contact tracing, working with their building administrators within the building. And we determine, working with the Department of Health, where there need to be any additional quarantines based on exposures within a classroom of a positive case. And so that will continue to be a plan moving forward. We're very refined at that now. We've had many cases in our schools. And again, our nurses have done a phenomenal job at, carrying out those contact trace experiences and reporting them to the Department of Health. And then the final mandatory mitigation measure will be meet the reporting requirements with the Department of Health. And so again, our nurses and administration have worked very, very closely with Department of Health this year and Dr. Berry and her team. That will continue to be a requirement moving forward. And we have a legal obligation that when we're alerted to a positive case, that has to be reported to the Department of Health, and they track all of that information. But beyond that, Department of Health has been really, really supportive of our school system this year with a very small team, but they have anytime our nurse or administrator have a potential case, a call is made and we get an answer almost immediately, and then direction around how we carry out the contact trace and deal with the quarantines accordingly. So our relationship with the local Department of Health is very, very good and healthy, and they have been very supportive in our work, which has now taken a next step, and we are offering vaccination clinics on our site. We've had a couple of events at Port Angeles High School, one at Lincoln High, and this week we had one at Stevens Middle School. That will continue to be a mandatory mitigation strategy moving into next year. The next item is physical distancing, but you can read this here. In addition to required mitigation measures above, physical distancing is recommended, and schools must have a plan that factors in physical distancing. Goes on to say 3 feet distancing in classrooms, 6 feet everywhere else to the greatest extent possible. So the state stopped short. This year, we had a non-negotiable 6-foot social distance bubble for students and adults within our system. Moving into next year, you can see that this is no longer a mandatory mitigation strategy that falls above. This is now recommended that in the classroom, we can social distance at a 3-foot measure, and everywhere else, to every extent possible, we need to try to social distance at 6 feet. We have to continue. We will continue to work through the summer on, just how we're going to carry out that work, particularly around events like lunch. But the important piece here is the last sentence. Physical distancing recommendations should not prevent a school from offering full-time in-person learning to all students and families in the fall. So it's recommended, it's not required. And we will do everything we can to make sure that we're practicing as much social distance as possible, but yet still offering 5-day in-person instruction for every family that desires that next year. So that really helps, with regards to this year. We've seen hybrid models, AB models this year, secondary and elementary level. This physical distancing recommendation helps us bring back all of our students. So this really helped in our efforts to get our students back on campus 100% of the time. And I believe that, if we practice fidelity to the mitigation requirements above, that really puts us in a good position to, again, continue to eliminate transmission within the schools. We're doing things now that a year ago, I wouldn't have guessed we could have done and not had COVID exposures and transmission. Example, we're playing basketball now. We have students traveling to school systems across this region, and other teams coming to us. We're out on the basketball court wearing masks, breathing hard, and how basketball's played. It's kind of a contact sport. And yet our teams, knock on wood, we haven't seen transmission because of the strategies that were around cleaning, around reporting cases, around face coverings. So, physical distancing and the lessening expectation of the physical distancing makes sense in that regard. The other item is, like, we're wrestling. And again, even 6 months ago, I would have thought, how in the world are we going to pull off wrestling? But our student athletes are wrestling at this point in time, and you all know exactly how close those activities are. So again, we're moving into a new phase of expectations around the Department of Health, and these are very welcomed by the Port Angeles School District and myself to get our students back in the classroom 100% of the time. The next page, and again, this will be emailed to you so you can read it in more thorough fashion. But the next page, the top sentence there is the last item that I want to hit before I open up for questions. Schools should also have a contingency plan that does not include physical distancing. So what that means is, when we reach the phase on the back end of this pandemic, and we return to what we thought of as normal pre-COVID, you can see the Department of Health starting to frame that. We have to have strategies in place or plans in place to return to normal. So that is a huge light at the end of the tunnel, and really gives hopefully all of us a lot of hope that in the very near future, we could be back to, our regular, lives. So this document goes on to give more detail around face coverings and each of the areas that I have just outlined: ventilation, cleaning and disinfecting, physical distancing, hand washing, which I did not cover, but those practices are expected to continue. We've had great hygiene practices this year within our schools, working with the Department of Health, reporting cases and notifying the public. So I will make sure that you get a copy of that by way of Jenny after this meeting. That way you can read it in more thorough fashion. The last item for me before I open it up for questions is that last week I was asked a question that I could not answer, and I hope the individual that asked me the question is in the room, but there was a question on vaccinations and would they be required and for students. So I asked Dr. Berry that very question this week, and her answer was, at this time, no. And until the Pfizer, Moderna, and until those vaccinations are fully vetted by FDA and approved, and the emergency label is taken off of them, there will be no consideration of a requirement for this vaccination and students returning to school. And then if that happens, and she anticipates at least the Pfizer vaccination or the Pfizer firm to pursue permanent authorization sometime midsummer is what she referenced. And when that happens, if that happens, and if it's approved by the FDA, then it's likely that this will be that the concept of the vaccination will go in front of the state legislature, and our lawmakers will consider whether or not this is a mandatory vaccination with some exemptions, moving forward, similar to what we see in MMR and other vaccinations for school systems. So more to come on that. So looking, 1, midsummer potentially for permanent approval, 2, state legislature engaging in this dialogue, and 3, making a determination on what that looks like for schools, systems, and students and staff across the state of Washington. So a lot more conversation to be had on that, but that's what I know on vaccination. So come day 1 of school and into the fall, likely not. So, all right, that's what I wanted to cover today. So now I'm ready, Jenny, to open it up to any questions that our community has today.
Okay, I have a question from Erin Kate Murphy. And the question is, do you have data on the percentage of PASD staff that is currently vaccinated? How is the district ensuring that staff and faculty are vaccinated?
Yeah, and who asked that question?
Erin Kate Murphy.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Erin Kate. I appreciate the question. So I don't have official data on Port Angeles School District staff. I think that information is tracked by the Department of Health, and it's something that I can request My educated guess would be, and it's just a guess, and so I'm not, this is not factual, but in my opinion, we're right around 70% vaccinated across our system, and that would be all levels of our organization. How we worked this year, when the vaccinations came out initially, we hosted shot clinics, and there was a couple of shot clinics that were targeted directly for staff of our system and schools across Clallam County. So, and we had a large number of takers at those events. And then we do have a group, just as we do in the community. We have, you know, those that want the shot. We have those that don't want the shot. And then we have that middle group that want more information. So what we did was we hosted a kind of talk with the doctor workshop, not workshop, but Zoom event with Dr. Mike Maxwell, which works with Known. And he spent about an hour and 15 minutes with interested staff members within our school system and even some neighboring schools, as we opened it up to our neighboring schools as well, and spent approximately, 45 minutes to an hour just talking about the vaccination and answering any questions that our staff did have. It was very helpful. We recorded that. And so those that did not or were not capable of attending, we sent that out to our staff for their viewing on their time. So, strategies like that, we will continue to work towards that and help to educate our staff on, the real facts around the vaccination, and we'll stay active in that regard. So thank you, Aaron, Kate, for that question.
Okay, and Sasha asked, will parents be able to volunteer next year?
That's a really good question. So again, I'm going to make some educated guesses here. Last year in the Department of Health guidance that came out, it was 3-4 times larger than this document. This document is only 9 pages long, which is great. Last year it was 50-60 pages long. And it specifically called out, Sasha, that volunteers and visitors in the building should be minimal or eliminated. So because it's not called out in this guidance, I believe today that there will be opportunities for parents and our community to get back into, some volunteer experiences. Again, because it's not in the guidance, I think there's an open opportunity there to, have restrictions in place for volunteers to follow the same guidance that our school system is following. But we have more work to do on that this summer. But it is likely, if it's not at the beginning of the year, Sasha, at some point in time next year, it's likely that visitors once again will be welcome within our schools.
Okay, and then I have a question from Geneva Manival. She's a senior parent, and she's wondering if any of the restrictions will be lessened for graduation, specifically the number of tickets each graduate can have for family to attend.
Okay. Thank you, Geneva. I appreciate the question. So we have, I've worked with Jeff Clark and also Mace Gratz, which is the Lincoln High principal. And we have created plans for in-person graduation. So that's one. We are having an in-person graduation. That's will happen. I'm super excited, just as we're having a number of in-person events for seniors and all of our students this late spring. But we submitted our plan to Dr. Berry last week. We're waiting to hear back. Our plan includes for Port Angeles High School, all students, some staff, some students that are from the orchestra class, board members, and then also parents. And the plan has 2 layers. One, each senior parent or each senior would have the ability for 2 tickets or 4 tickets. And Civic Field holds approximately 2,000 people. Phase 3 guidance outlines 50% capacity in outdoor events. So we're hopeful that our plan is, one, approved by Dr. Berry, and two, approved to give us the ability to go from 2 to 4 tickets. Now I want to put a huge asterisk next to that.
Marty, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Jenny?
Yes.
Where did I end up? How long was I talking without?
Not long.
Okay. So 2 to 4 tickets based on, subject to the Department of Health approval. I want to put an asterisk next to the 4 tickets because it's going to be weather related. This event, for this size of event, because we're going to now be talking anywhere from, with the graduates and then those individuals to carry out the graduation, we're going to be talking about 275 people, and then 2 tickets per graduate, we could be talking another 400. And then if we go to 4 tickets, that would be 800. So it will be a large scale event, you know, one of the largest scale events in our county for nearly a year. So this event has to be held outside. So when I say it's weather permitting for 4 tickets, if it's approved by Dr. Berry, if it's, you know, the weather doesn't cooperate, our graduates are going to have to go under the canopy. And that could limit the number, not less than 2, but that could limit, you know, from 4 to 2, you know, graduation tickets for family members. So we're hopeful that, 1, the weather cooperates, and 2, that Dr. Berry will give us the ability to increase our number of participants or number of family members for each graduate from 2 to 4. I don't have an answer for that today, but I should likely have an answer next week.
Okay, we have a question from Sean. He has a 4th grader. Currently, students are spaced out for social distance, only half in the class at one time. What will be the spacing requirements for fall, and how will you accommodate those requirements with current space?
Yeah, so the physical distancing in the classroom next year is scheduled to be at 3 feet. And so we will space our students 3 foot. This year, it's a mandatory 6. So in theory, that gives us the ability to take our classes this year, you know, ranged from 12 to 14, you know, depending on the size of the class, at 6 foot. So when you reduce that in half, that increases, you know, the capacity of a classroom from 24 to, you know, 28 students, again, depending on the class size and the square footage of the actual classroom. So we are working with building principals in each class space to make sure we know what the capacity of a classroom is, and we have the right furniture for correct spacing to occur within that classroom. So it helps a lot because it reduces that spacing in half. And so doubling the number of students in an AB model this year is completely possible in a 3 foot social distance, not requirement, recommendation.
Okay, and then we have a question. What is the plan on how to get our children caught back up where they should be?
Yeah. So great question. We are working right now double time on our it's not called the reopening plan next year. It's the I'm blanking right now. Jenny, can you help me with that? The state of Washington has required school systems to come up with a new or a plan for helping to recover learning loss this summer and into next school year. We're working on those plans right now. In fact, they are getting very near complete. And we use the survey data that we took a couple of weeks ago from staff, students, and parents to help guide those decisions based on Where do parents want to see additional learning opportunities embedded in the school day, outside the school day, summer school opportunities? So we've taken all of that information and used that working with building level teams and principals to outline a plan moving forward. The state requirement is also to look very closely at all of the data that we have on our students to address who needs additional help with potential learning loss. And so our plans are going to be very detailed, and they will be comprehensive to give us a starting spot for this summer and next year. They will evolve as the year evolves, and we continue to get more data back on our students around where their potential deficiencies are. But just as we've done this year, with regards to reopening schools, and I'm really proud, and I empathize with every parent in this room. It has been a tough year. It's been a tough year on school system, and I know it's been a tough year on many of you at home. But we have worked really hard this year to lead the conversation, to get our students back into the classroom, to get our students back on the courts, to get our students back in the performances. And I'm really proud of that. And so we are building very comprehensive plans that won't just, check the box, but actually give us real data that we can use moving forward to address the pockets of deficiency that we know we have. So we are fully aware of that, and we are, nearing the completion, at least the initial part of the plan, to help address that. To include summer school, summer school options, not required, to include in-person interventions during the instructional day, and potentially also interventions moving into next year, around outside the day. But I do want to say, and this is, I recognize we have learning loss. There is no two ways about it, and I want to own that. But we've done some things this year that put us in a very different light than many school systems across our state. It took a governor's order to return many of the schools across the state of Washington back to school on, I think it was April 19th. So there's like 50 to 60% of students across the state of Washington just started to go to school a month ago. I'm really proud that, we were able to bring our elementary students back, even though we had to regress around Thanksgiving. But we were bringing back our elementary students and sped students as early as September of last year. So that's helped. We got our secondary students back into school on, I think the date was January 26th, if I remember right, and then February 1st. So our students have been back in school more than the norm is across the state of Washington. Doesn't lessen the fact that we have a lot of work to do, but that's going to help us. The other thing that's going to help us is we haven't waited to, devise this plan moving forward to start addressing learning loss. Even when we were in a full remote setting at the secondary level, we were getting creative around having students come in for tutoring opportunities, and our administrators and counselors and teachers reaching out to say, hey, we have an option for you, and engaging families in that process. And hundreds of kids started coming back even before we had brick and mortar learning for secondary students. The other part is at the secondary level, we've already started embedded during the instructional day credit recovery options. That's being offered right now in our high schools, around if a student failed a course at the beginning of this year or at the end of last year, they were given an option to start recovering that credit right now, not moving into next year, right now, and supports in doing so. We also made it was not popular, but I had to make a really difficult decision to move from an AB model at the elementary level, being 2 days a week, to an AM PM model, and that has really helped. I know it was a huge lift for our parents, many of our parents and families, but it has helped tremendously. to get our students back 5 days a week and engaged in learning 5 days a week. So we're seeing significant growth, by just that measure alone. So part of our strategy is we haven't just waited until now to start addressing it. We've been working to try to address learning loss throughout the pandemic. And again, that leads the conversation in the state of Washington. That wasn't the norm. And, we will maintain that commitment moving forward to address the learning loss that we know is still there. And so more to come on that. Next week, I have Michelle Olson to come out, and she will be sharing more around our plans and moving forward, not just in the summer, but into the fall. So I encourage you to come back for much more detailed information next week.
Okay, that question was from Tracy, and it was a two-part question. So the second part is, if vaccines become mandatory, what will be the options for children who are not vaccinated for school?
So we have mandatory vaccinations for MMR and some other, requirements right now. A couple of years ago, the state legislature took action and narrowed the exemptions. There are still some exemptions there, but the exemptions were narrowed significantly. So if a family cannot get vaccinated and it's medically related, I mean, there would be potentially exemption. But if it's potentially just by choice and there's no exemptions that apply, I think the option for a family would be looking at homeschooling and or 100% virtual online school. And unfortunately, that doesn't apply to state of Washington public online school like ours, Seaview, because if you enroll in that, you have to have proof of immunization. So yeah, that will be a tough choice and a tough decision for many families. But and that's many steps down the road. I gave you what Dr. Berry said today, what the state legislature does with the COVID vaccination. There isn't anybody in this room that can predict that. So, it's likely to be debated at a very high level with state lawmakers and determined what's best for the state thereafter, whether that's a mandatory or a recommendation. So that's the best I can do today.
I feel like you pretty much just answered this, but this one says, if vaccinations are not available for younger kids by the start of school, what accommodations will be available for those families opting not to attend face-to-face?
Yeah, we are excited because our Seaview Academy was authorized as a permanent online option, not only for students in the Port Angeles School District, but students across the state of Washington. We went through a very comprehensive application process and became a state provider of online options for students in our district and across the state. So that would be a very healthy option for an individual that wanted an online option for their child moving forward because of vaccination considerations. I am very proud of Seaview Academy this year. We are, a year and a half old, but our folks, our staff have worked really, really hard. And, there isn't many multi-district providers across the state of Washington. And to do that in less than a year is really fascinating and shows the hard work of this school system to make that happen. So it's a good, healthy option for an individual that has concerns about, vaccinations and maybe doesn't, or just COVID exposure. It is a great option for an individual that wants something that's more contained as far as an educational program, contained to an online format.
Along with that, a question that says, will there be any vaccinated versus non-vaccinated classes to increase class sizes? There
has been no discussion of that at this time.
Okay, and Jennifer asks, what is being done to address the social mental abuse that our kids are experiencing due to mandatory face coverings and social distancing?
We have, I think that's going to be, any emotional stress provided by the pandemic, will be on a case-by-case basis. We do have social emotional curriculum that we've implemented for every child this year, and our counselors are keen on working with individuals through that process. But for an individual that's experiencing anxiety and or extreme social emotional concerns around the pandemic and the requirements around the pandemic, those students need to be handled on a case-by-case basis. And I would encourage you and your son or daughter to reach out and start with the building counselor, engage in a conversation. We have resources, and the counselors have resources to be able to, provide more in-depth support for an individual, to include opportunities to work in more of a therapy type session with district resources, as well as we have a student navigator. Becca Larson can help families find resources in our school system and also out of our school system. I would really encourage any parent that is experiencing, that level of anxiety and social emotional loss due to the pandemic to reach out first, building principal and or counselor, so that we can start to address that on a case-by-case basis. But as a system, to help with social emotional health of all students, we implemented a curriculum this year for the first year, and that's meant to help all students, but not to the level where there's a heightened level of anxiety or other issues related to the pandemic. So I would encourage case by case to reach out and make that contact with the building principal and or the counselor, so that we can help that particular child with what he or she needs.
Thank you.
Jenny, if anybody wants to have their mic opened up, they can ask the question specifically to me, or if they want to keep typing in the chat, that's fine.
Yes,
I like to hear voices too.
I've asked them if they asked me
Okay.
to do it. So
Okay.
I also did put the link in the chat box. So
okay, thank you.
the link that you pulled up. So I have no further questions at this time. We have 13 minutes left. If anybody has anything else.
I would love to hear somebody ask a question in person or virtually. It's great hearing Jenny's voice, but I want to hear somebody else's. So any other questions?
Oh, I have somebody that wants to ask a question. Yes. All right, go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, Superintendent Brewer.
Hi.
I am a kindergarten mom, and so as silly as this sounds, I need to ask the question, what will a typical school day look like from drop off to pick up? I don't know that. I haven't experienced that yet. Could you tell me what that looks like?
Yeah. So this will be your first child in our system, Melissa?
Yeah, well, I have two that are kindergartners right now. And so as first graders, we're talking about full days, which is exciting, but I don't know what a full day looks like. So is that a 7:25 drop off still and a 2:45 pickup, or what does that look like? Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah. it will be very similar to what, in that this doesn't help you, but the pre-pandemic, we're still ironing out, we're still working on the logistics around start times, end times. But when I say a full day, yeah, we'll be back to, the 7:35, 7:40 time to just after two time, but we haven't, and that's gonna, Melissa, and I would like to get you a better answer today, but part of our reopening plan, we'll get more clarity with regards to that. So if you come back next week, I will be able to give you a crystal clear answer. Today, full day will be outlined as, pre-pandemic, there'll be mitigation measures. We'll have the drop offs will look a little different, the social distancing, the masking on the playgrounds, or the no masking on the playgrounds will continue. Whether or not we eat in the classroom or in a gymnasium, that's still to be ironed out. Your child will, when I say a full experience, your child will be back into the mode where they're experiencing PE and music rather than from a virtual setting, to an in-person setting. That will be back as the full battery of experiences, recesses. It will be very near normal, what we saw pre-pandemic. So to add to what you're experiencing this year, eating, whether that be classroom and or gym, you would be looking at a specialist, which, music and PE, and library, more recess time, obviously, because they're here for a longer period of time. That really outlines the more normal side of it. But again, next week, specific to questions around times, we're still working on that. And if you come back, we'll be able to get you a more clear answer next week. I hope I did the best. I mean, that's the best I can do today, but we're still developing.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question, Melissa. I appreciate it.
Okay, and Jennifer has a question.
Hello, Superintendent Brewer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi there. My question is a follow-up to my previous question about the effects, maybe chronic, maybe we won't know what the effects are to these children until years down the road, to the mandatory face coverings and social distancing. But my concern is, as a parent, what can I do? Who can I reach out to have a real impact on the decisions that are made about covering children's faces and making them be separated from one another at such a critical time in their lives? What do I do? Who can I talk to make a real impact, not just say the words, but to cause a change?
So as it relates to face coverings, as you've seen, and I'm not trying to push the buck here, Jennifer, at all, but that's a mandatory mitigation strategy for school districts. My recommendation would be to reach out to Dr. Berry and have a conversation with her. She doesn't make state decisions as well, but she is, in the room when the State Department of Health is having conversations on what their mandatory mitigation strategies would be. So from a local level, I think, and I've found Dr. Berry to be very receptive to feedback and conversations around, the pandemic in general. And she, has young children of her own. So I think she can really relate to what a young family's going through now. That would be what I would, that's what I would recommend that you consider. I can put her email address to begin the conversation in the chat, if you're open to that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I don't know if you have it, Jenny.
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay, thank you. So that's where I would start. With regards to the social distancing, again, that is a mandatory mitigation strategy this year. Next year, it lessens significantly. I think that's growth in the right direction, Jennifer. And getting our students back on campus all day into a more normal experience. You know, and there is, when you read this document, the summer and 2021 school year Health Department of Health guidance, you know, last year it was kind of written in the form that 6 foot is, you know, is the expectation, no greater than 15 minutes, you know, close contact exposure. This year, you know, when you get into the physical distancing, there is understanding that there are many times within a day when students get much closer than that. And so it is opening the door significantly to the physical distancing mandate to lessen and potentially, you know, in the near future, I don't know if that's next month, 3 months from now, or in 6 months from now, to go away. But it is progress. And again, if you're, you know, looking to engage with someone around that, I can offer, you know, a conversation with staff, you know, here in our district. Michelle Olson would be a great one to speak with in more detail. I would do that as well. And, or again, you know, just conversation with Dr. Berry around progress and where the state's moving and with regards to physical distancing. But again, of the guidance, 2 things. Number one, I was happy to see that it's much, much less than it was this year. But 2, that reduction of the expectation around that 6 foot social distance will help us a lot. I mean, not only on the organizational side of getting students back in school, but also getting back to normal, where kids and adults can interact in a positive manner, because this is a relationship. You know, schools are about relationships, and that you know, physical closeness and contact is an important part of what we do as we grow up as individuals and working with our teachers. So that would be my recommendation. And I will have Jenny send you Dr. Berry's contact information. And then if you would like to meet with me and or Ms. Olson, I would be glad to set that up as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
You betcha. Thank you, Jennifer, for the question.
All right, I have no new questions.
Well, we are 3 minutes away from the end of the hour. I want to once again say thank you to each of you for coming to the meeting this week. I appreciate it. It's nice to see so many folks out today. Tell your friends, tell your peers to come on out next week. The more that come out and hear firsthand what we're trying to work on, to kind of dispel some of those, you know, things that may be circulating in the community. I'm happy to answer what I can. And if I don't have an answer, I'll bring it back to you the next week. So appreciate your time. Again, Michelle Olson will be with us next week to talk in more detail, summer learning and learning into the fall, as well as she'll talk about transitional kindergarten. I do want to put a plug into that. Transitional kindergarten is intended for 4-year-olds, and it is a free program. If your child is not in a ECAP or Head Start or another preschool program, and he or she may not be exposed to a preschool program prior to their kindergarten year, that's who we want in this program. And we have a total of potentially 48 seats across our district, and many of those seats aren't taken. And it's a free preschool program all day, every day. And you know, please help us get the word out. You know, we want to fill those seats and offer this program to all of our 4-year-olds and families. So help with that. And Michelle will talk in more detail about that next week. So with that being said,
Marty, I have 2 more questions if you want to take them real quick.
Okay.
I have a question from Deidre. I can't seem to get her to unmute. So that question is, sorry, mask question. Will there be opportunity for vaccinated students to be maskless?
That's a great question. And I don't have an answer to that today, but I think there's potential. I think, and again, I've talked to Dr. Bear about this. If we hit what they call herd immunity, which is in schools, 70% of individuals vaccinated, both staff and students, things in schools start to change significantly. So yeah, I think there's potentially a possibility. Now I'm not the decision maker there, but I think there's a possibility of opening up, the mask conversation if we have what's called herd immunity. So yeah, more to come. And I think that also can help us in the social distance guidance as well. So it's encouraging.
Okay, I did put Dr. Berry's email in the chat, and you're getting many thank yous for today's.
All right. And thank you very much for your time, and look forward to seeing you next week. Invite your friends. I'd like to double it up next week and have 50 out next week. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you soon. And don't hesitate to reach out if I can help you in any way. Have a great day.